Hello, I'm Alan Willen. This is a video to cover a tool that I wrote for DSU's CSC 842, the Security Tool Development course. So I wrote a tool called MailMan. The idea being it's a essentially a piece of malware, very basic, run in Python, but the interesting or unique part about it, I think, is the command and control over email. So in the bottom here, I have the essentially the piece of malware running in listening mode, and then up here we will run the controller. So the way that this is currently set up is that there are two email accounts, one to send the commands to the piece of malware, and then the other account for the piece of malware to communicate the data back to the controller. So presently, the way that this is configured is talking to a local email server on the Kali station. The client is polling the account every second currently, so obviously for a real world usage that would be minutes or hours rather than continuous polling. This is mainly for the demos purposes. So every second it will authenticate to the server, check to see if there are any mail. If there are mail, download each of them, and then decrypt the payload that's in the body of the email, act on that, and then for the second email account, it will push back to that server the output from the command, and then we'll pull it back on the controller. So SMTP is being used to send email, and then in this case, it's configured to use POP3 to pull the mail down, but IMAP is also usable and straightforward in this as well. So we'll start by just sending a couple shell commands. So we'll send a PS, and then that's that. So in the bottom, there won't be any output simply because rather than setting up like a demo mode that would output things that got it, I just kind of let it sit and do its thing as it would in the wild. So at this point, because it should be pulling every second, it should have long since pulled the two commands we sent, so we can grab the output. So the controller keeps track of what commands it's run. That's the worst command apparently. So it says, hey, command 2 was the netstat that we sent, command 1 was the PS that we sent, and this is the output that came back from the client. So we can also have the ability to run arbitrary Python. So this is just passing whatever is typed here to an eval statement in the client code. So So that of course breaks it because it did not like the semicolon, so don't mind that. So let's try just true, who cares? So we got our command back that just simply says true from the client side. We can get an arbitrary file. So we can get user bin bash. So this will take a sec. So for sending and receiving files, that's going to pull the contents and then base64 encode it before passing it through everything else. So right now it's not particularly efficient. It's just the way I chose to do it to get it done. As an aside, the actual data gets put into the body of the email is using the same algorithms that I use for most of my other scripts at this point. So it's going to compress or zip the data. It's going to AES encode or AES encrypt the data, and then base64 encode the data. Ideally, we would do MIME encoding, but base64 encoding was much quicker. So as I note in the future direction, properly supporting MIME encoding, putting the exfil or the commands into attachments so that they look less odd, I think are ideal. So at this point, which should long since have given us our file, so we'll get the output. So it recognizes that we successfully pulled the file, so we just have to write it to a local file, and that, since I didn't give it a path, it just dumped it into our directory. So if we sum the bash on the system and compare it to the one we just downloaded, it's the same as you would hope it would be. We can also send a file. Again, we can just choose to send bin bash. So there is one thing wonky about this, is the way that I'm storing the commands locally when I hit get output here. So the client is going to send a response back to us. It just says it completed the put. So on our side, it shows the whole base64 encoded binary, but it does show done. And again, that should be in our local directory because these are both running from the same place. And we can again check our hash and it matches. So that's the whole functionality of it. It's nothing particularly earth-shattering. I always enjoy playing with protocols, so I thought it was interesting. I did attempt to get this working through some common email providers. I was a little bit skittish about creating accounts associated with my personal information. So although I was able to create Gmail accounts with no problem, they don't Gmail early last year stopped supporting third-party applications such as this interacting with their service over IMAP or POP or SMTP, primarily to prevent spam because there's no real legitimate reason to be doing most of this. AOL and Yahoo are very obnoxious in that they require you to associate a phone, successfully associate a phone number and receive an SMS. I wasn't able to get any like receive SMS services online to work with it, and I obviously again don't want to use my own phone number for this. Yandex did allow me to do that quasi fake SMS authentication, but I wasn't able to successfully get Yandex to behave with my code. I don't know if I created the accounts too quickly before I started using them or what, but I may or may not have blacklisted myself on Yandex. Another great blacklist on my part. The code is relatively straightforward. It's written in a way that I hope that it would be expandable. It allows you to specify arbitrary ports and protocols. So if you're running a mail service on a non-standard port, you can do that. If you want to implement a different protocol, you could do that. But as it stands, it supports the 3 standard mail protocols. If the connection isn't over the SSL protocol by default, it will attempt to start TLS. So if you connect to 25, 110, or 143, it will try to run the associated TLS commands to try to encrypt the traffic, and that is prior to the username and password being passed. So from like a network defender standpoint, obviously preventing a user from connecting to weird mail services would kind of prevent this, unless the malware controller or malware author creates good email accounts which it would be somewhat difficult for large scale services. Obviously, standing up your own email server allows you to get around that. Then you have the issue of reputation. Like if I have an at random.com, that might not be particularly legitimate looking, and someone might catch on after a bit. So, unlike some of the other things I've written, I think this is not as directly and immediately usable. But again, I think it's an interesting demonstration of ways to kind of like think outside of the box for how you can implement command and control. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.